Okay, let's see if it's working this time. Oh my gosh. Hi. Sorry I'm late. Technology is somebody's friend, but not mine most days. Um, so it is 7:14. We're 14 minutes late for our broadcast, but I'm here. I'm here. Um, and we're on the other side of a full moon. Woohoo. Aren't you loving life? You see, this looks like a teacup, but in reality, it's filled with gin. I'm just kidding. I'm actually just kidding. It's way too early in the evening to start drinking. So please introduce yourselves and let me know that I'm not here by myself talking to myself like a crazy person. And I was trying to do this on OBS um, so that I could broadcast and show you guys my charts while I'm also doing the talking to you. But OBS is being difficult. I'm not completely sure what's going on. And I realized that when I'm doing OBS, I can't actually see your chat responses. So kind of takes away, like totally makes the whole point of a conversation moot if I can't see what you're saying, right? Hello, Bianca. So while we have a nice, cozy, intimate group of tres gentes, um, this is a great time for you guys to just put out questions or thoughts if you have them. Anything that is not a conspiracy theory is welcome today. How is everybody holding up under the pandemic? I don't know if you can see, but I have bags under my eyes because I'm literally not sleeping at night anymore. What state is Manatee County in? See, I'm up here. Oh, okay. Yeah, Florida. Jeez, you're governor, dude. I'm up here around Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania closed their liquor stores. They literally they won't even let people go get their alcohol. So I can't even imagine being in the city of Philadelphia right now with that, right? Yeah, well, it's interesting. One of the things that they talk about, not right now, but this is kind of a given. They know this in the health behavioral sciences, is that anytime you do a massive disruption of somebody's routine, it is destabilizing. And when you disrupt a pattern or routine that a person has grown accustomed to and has become a very vital, predictable touchstone in their life, meaning that they know at this time this has to happen, and at that time that they need to be in this place. When those things are removed and you destabilize somebody, they are the most susceptible to external suggestion and influence. So, literally, in terms of brainwashing, right now, the entire country is at its most vulnerable because everybody, well, globally too, but everybody's completely, off their rockers. Yeah, my understanding is that Delaware, has circled wagons, right? So, people coming in from anywhere else into the state of Delaware, because apparently Delaware has their liquor stores still open. Um, so anybody in the neighboring states that comes in is required to quarantine in Delaware for 14 days before they can leave again. So, we weren't sure exactly how they were gonna enforce that, but that was pretty entertaining that they were gonna do that. Ooh, yay, 4 people. So, we have a little bit of a lag between me asking a question or making a statement and you guys typing and the messages getting across. So we're going to be a little out of sync during the conversation. So bear with me. Um, for those of you who are watching the video right now that are not watching the chat live, um, Badomaji has just indicated that more time out of work, less money. I fear violence will increase. And Amy Guski says, lucky to have a high alcoholic rate, like second in the country. So they didn't close our liquor stores. Ha! And of course, Boston. Ah, you Boston people. Bianca says Boston is a voluntary curfew. Oh my gosh. So I don't. So it's an interesting thing, right? Because Brit Times call in the back of their mind, and very quietly with to make more of it, talking about the fact that there is the very distinct possibility of violence. Um, I don't necessarily think it will get that bad. Um, I just don't. And if it does, I would hate to see everybody who is disenfranchised at this point going after each other, because the real problems here are the people who are making these policies and put us in this position and are keeping us in this position. Um, so if violence breaks out, the rich, the very, very wealthy, and the known policymakers have more to worry about than the rest of us. You can believe it. Well, hello, KW. Yeah, high alcoholic rate. There's a joke, right? That when we get to the other side of this pandemic, if the entire group of us do not end up with alcohol abuse or addiction issues and weight problems, it's going to be a miracle. Yeah, it's extremely tough to focus. One of the things that happens, by the way, in case you didn't know, is when somebody is under a tremendous amount of exceptional stress, right? Not normal, everyday, highs and lows kinds of stress, but exceptional life threatening stress. One of the things that happens is that people lose their ability to do critical thinking or to have long term memory. So their short term memory gets impaired. You literally can't remember anything. Like things like you put your keys down, walk away, and 2 minutes later, you literally can't remember where you set your keys down or that you even had keys. The other thing is it makes it very difficult to do critical thinking. So things that require planning and deep thought and critical thinking and making critical judgments so you can make the right choices totally out the window. You can't do it, yeah, under situations of exceptional stress. And this is across the board for everybody. Um, Badamaji, I thought a nice layer cake would help with stress. I think it will. And I think you should make sure I get some too. So anyway, in these times, what we're all experiencing together as a group, as a whole unit, we are all experiencing exceptional life threatening, life and death kind of stress, which typically was only ever experienced by people in combat situations or people in situations of domestic violence or people who are homeless, right? So, one of the things that's going to be very important for us to remember when we come out of this is how this feels. Our inability to sleep, our desire for sweets, our desire for alcohol, our inability to think past short, simple commands and sentences. Just the desire to sleep all the time, the kind of zombie-like difficulty in comprehending more critical things, the ability to remember simple things. Remember these feelings because this is what people who are homeless, people who are in situations of domestic violence, and people who are dealing with traumatic stress, either actively or as post-traumatic stress disorder, these feelings we are all experiencing right now, these effects we're all feeling, they feel this all the time because of their situations. So this is a phenomenal real life, live time opportunity to learn empathy from actual experience. Luckily, we will get through this, but for people who are in combat, or people who are in situations of domestic violence, or people who are homeless, the ability to live to see the next day is not guaranteed for them in much more urgent, in your face sort of ways. So there is that. Hey, Julianne. Yeah, what I've been noticing a lot is because I work a part-time job right now. Thank God I've got a part-time job, and it's service labor, menial task sort of job, but it works, right? Keeps me out of the house, um, and keeps me from losing my ever-loving mind because most of my time is spent by myself anyway. So I'm typically alone writing and working on the computer all the time. Um, so I don't miss being around people as much, but even for me, it's starting to get to me. So, the little piece of part-time job I have gets me out of the house, which is good. But one of the things that I've noticed is not only have I become a little more mean than usual, and I can be mean as a rattlesnake, believe it. But also, I've noticed people around me, even the nicest people, are mean. They don't mean to be. It's just a spontaneous kind of like, "Rah." So the tension is really bringing out the mean side of people, whether they intend to let the cat loose or not. Bianca, is there anything in astrology that explains why this is happening in 2020? Or is that numerology? I just keep thinking about the symbolism. So that's a great question. So there are a couple of the stray cats love you for that. There are a couple of schools of thought about why this is happening. So, the thing about it is, as astrologers and soothsayers and fortune tellers, we like to think that we have an explanation for everything because that's our job, right? That's your job. You're supposed to know these things, and predict them. But, you know, as far as predicting this, the scientists knew decades ago. There's been discussion about this as a real possibility that has occurred starting decades ago. This is not new as far as the scientists are concerned. If anybody remembers, there was a book that came out a long time ago called The Hot Zone about a viral pandemic that went, a global pandemic. That book was so terrifying. I literally took it back to the bookstore and got my refund. I'm like, I won't even, I don't even want this in my house. Um, But they've been talking about this for a long time, and all of this is connected to climate change because as the Arctic caps start to melt, all of those viruses that have been frozen in those Arctic caps get released. The thing about viruses is that viruses mutate. So when we get a flu shot, and a flu is a virus, coronavirus literally is the fancy medical term for flu. Um, when we get a flu shot, we're getting a flu shot based on the profile of last year's virus because we have no way of predicting how last year's virus is going to mutate when it mutates again. So the best we can do is use last year's virus as a prototype for some type of vaccine to hopefully build up enough of our immunity that when the new mutation of the virus comes around, we're not as susceptible to it. And this is why it's not always 100% effective in everyone, right? Because the virus mutates, the vaccine we have will boost your immune system, but it won't prevent you from getting the new mutation. So some people, even with the vaccine, are still going to get sick with the flu because it wasn't enough. So viruses mutate over and over and over again. They're like the sneaky little ninjas of the freaking biosphere. So, and scientists knew this was going to be an issue. The whole viral global pandemic was going to be an issue. They just didn't know how, who, or when. Although I'm certain with their math and sciences, they could have figured it out. So there's that. So there are other astrologers like, oh, well, Pluto, what is it? I think I heard somebody say it's, oh, Saturn in Aquarius, that's why we're going to have pandemic. Um, and Pluto, but when they talk about Pluto, typically they're talking about the United States having a Pluto return, right? So astrologically, I don't know. And I don't give it much thought because at this point, it doesn't matter how it got here. Or what matters is how we're going to get it out of the house. How do we get the damn thing out of the house, and how do we make sure it doesn't come back again, right? Um, I do know that remember all this last year, we had Saturn in Capricorn, Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Sagittarius, right? So we had three of your major outer planets in their rulership. Remember, this is huge, huge stuff because planets in their rulership, planets coming back home to their native lands, have much stronger effect and powers and more clear messages and evolutionary demands because everything in astrology is about an evolutionary demand. With that said, what we also had was this triple, quadruple conjunction in Capricorn. Remember, we were talking about that. So back when was Bush in office? The first year Bush was in office, I think it was 2008. There was a grand conjunction. It's like multiple planets all aligned in Taurus. And everybody was like, "Oh, well," they were had such huge hopes and expectations for this thing, and nothing happened. Um, but something did happen, and now, just this past couple of months ago, we had this huge alignment in Capricorn, and I did a video about this somewhere. I don't remember which one it is, but it's the Taurus and Capricorn. Both of these are feminine placements, so this is the goddess returning, and the sign of Capricorn has everything to do with, remember, we talked about this. Saturn in Capricorn has everything to do with leadership, responsibility, obligation, legacy, time, right? Generations, what we leave behind. All of these things get tested and challenged, and you have to pass your test with flying colors to get through this. So we've been offered a test while Saturn is in Capricorn, that has everything to do with leadership, what leadership means for us, what we'll tolerate from our leadership, how we define leadership, right? And we've seen a lot of it, and unfortunately, all the bad ways. So, Saturn heading into Aquarius isn't necessarily an indicator that a pandemic was coming. But Saturn in Aquarius, remember, Saturn is where you're being tested. It's your final exam for your evolutionary course, before you can move on to the next level. So Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, right? Aquarius, do you know what Aquarius rules? Aquarius rules other people's children. It represents the community at large. It represents the global community versus the local community. So Saturn moving into Aquarius, because Saturn is the planet of responsibilities and obligations, Saturn in Aquarius is giving us experiences that are teaching us and challenging us to master these lessons about our responsibilities and our obligations to the community at large, the global community, and other people's children, not just your own. hmm So this pandemic is certainly bringing that lesson home hard, for sure. I don't know that we're necessarily gonna have any more breakouts of violence, than we have under any other time, and I think there are a lot of people, or not a lot of people, there are certainly factions and groups of people who are absolutely committed to this fantasy of, a great, breakout of violence, which is why they're all buying their guns, right? So they're literally creating the future they're trying to avoid, or they say they're trying to avoid. And I know there's some, what is it they call it? The Boogaloo? I don't even know what this is. I'm apparently not a member of that club. But they're itching for an excuse to fight. These guys, like, they're always looking for an excuse to go shoot their guns, shoot their mouths off, and go shoot people, right? So if there's any amount of, like, overwhelming mass violence, it's going to be that. It's going to be literally these yahoos with guns looking for an excuse to shoot their damn mouths and their guns off, because that's all they've been looking for, and they'll be the ones to instigate it. This will not be like, um, I don't even know what to compare this to. So in China, with the Hong Kong protests, which is much more complicated than our press covers it here in the U.S., the violence is not was not instigated by the protesters. The violence was instigated by the police, who are trying to maintain control, and order, or whatever. I don't know, but you got a whole bunch of angry people, which is pretty much the entire population of Hong Kong. You might want to just cool your jackboots there, buddy. And they didn't. So people responded because they were being treated grossly unfairly in that particular situation. The news is on the internet. It's easy enough to find, right? With the Los Angeles riots, the Rodney King riots from way back in the day, right? Where like the entire, like, sections of Los Angeles went crazy and started busting up shops and setting things on fire and everything else. Like, this was a result of an incredibly unfair judicial system, and this had literally the last straw, and people just lost their minds. So here's the thing, though. This is very different from, as an example, the mass violence and the riots and the destruction of property, like, willy-nilly, that we've seen in places like Philadelphia with their sports fans. For God's sakes, these people went out and, what is it? I think they set something on fire because their team lost or something. Dude, there are people in this world who are looking for reasons to just shoot off their mouths, shoot guns, and go hurt people and destroy things for any reason. Just give them an excuse. My team losing a game is plenty of excuse to go set cars on fire. Oh my god. So, I don't know that we're necessarily gonna have any greater amount of violence, but I do know that there are people who are literally have itchy trigger fingers that are looking for an excuse to go shoot people, and that's pretty damn scary. Alright. Well, Mars was conjunct Pluto a few days ago. Violence has escalated during this time. Right. But here's the thing, statistically speaking, has it necessarily escalated any greater than any other time? Right. And also, given the circumstances that we're under, even if Mars weren't near Pluto, everybody is literally under house arrest and everybody's a little nuts right now. So violence is expected, to go up as people's tensions escalate. This is probably why we're not closing liquor stores in a lot of places, because at least people can um, pacify themselves a little bit with, alcohol for whatever that's worth. Yeah, the US Pluto return is interesting. Ooh, KW's got some great comments in here. Um, okay, so the US Pluto return we'll talk about in a second. Um, and it's interesting to watch it unfold because Pluto always has to do with uh, deep, deep reformation and destruction. Pluto will literally burn your, excuse my language, I'm about to curse. Pluto will burn your shit to the ground and stand there in the middle of it and then look at you and go, okay, there's nothing left now except you, and maybe the clothes on your back, whatever's left of them. So now what do you have to say for yourself? That's Pluto, right? So the thing about Pluto is that Pluto is very much like the raising that they do out in the woods. So there's this thing that they do, and I'm not completely sure what this is called, but they will literally go burn down forest or sections of forest to increase new fresh growth, right? I'm not completely sure how that works, but I know they do it. And that's kind of what Pluto does. Pluto will go in and raise an area, raze, raise, burn down everything in a specific area. Ultimately, the purpose, of course, is to encourage and stimulate fresh, new, healthy growth. So the United States on a Pluto return, especially given all the shady nonsense that we've been dealing with, the shenanigans since, well, I mean, we're living it. We may be seeing everything that all of our sacred cows are being burned to the ground. We may have a giant barbecue, a plutonian barbecue of our sacred cows here in the country. But it's necessary. One of the things that I know is that comfort and complacency makes for laziness. Laziness in thinking, laziness in problem solving, laziness in concerns, laziness in effort. People get really lazy really fast when they're too comfortable and too complacent. And unfortunately, when that happens, people also become very selfish and very lacking any compassion or empathy because that's too much work, right? So this is kind of where we've come to as a whole. And Amy Guski says there's been many stories in the news of people helping others, which is phenomenal, phenomenal. So other things to remember is that Neptune is still in its rulership sign, Pisces, and Neptune is about compassion, right? And help, like championing the underdog and doing it's literally the Christ planet. So it's very much about doing what you can with what you have for people who are less fortunate than you are, because you can, and that's what you should be doing, right? Because when you give, what you give is multiplied. So right now, with all that's going on and everyone working harder to be less uh, spiritually offensive, it's a very, very good thing. And also, too, I mean, we've been through so much in the last couple of years. Like, people are tired and people are starting to recognize that crappy behavior is just crappy behavior, no matter what you dress it up as. toxic positivity. That's interesting. KW says toxic positivity through religious, spiritual, and celebrity figures exhibiting callous, disease spreading behaviors marked as positive. Toxic positivity is like using the guise of being positive to berate and demean others. Oh, you mean like every new ager and astrologer and tarot reader and, woo woo, whatever, psychic, like that we know that's, white light and love? Oh, please. Oh, no, I can't deal with all negativity. Right? Which really just means you're annoying me and I don't have the backbone to tell you you're annoying me. So I'm just going to make you look like the villain here because you're making me uncomfortable. So yeah, I don't know. And you expect this from Hollywood people. So I don't know. Mm. Controlled burn. Yes, controlled burn. So, has everyone been making their masks? Have you been making masks? I'm wearing mine. This is my mask. I made this. I'm so proud of myself. This is my mask. We have, or we had briefly paper masks to wear at work, which were just god awful. One of the problems with paper masks is that because you're breathing in and out into it, the moisture from your breath mats the paper fibers in the mask, and then after like a day or two, it's literally like trying to breathe through a sheet of paper. It's impossible. Thank you. So if you have any rudimentary sewing skills, make a mask. And I highly recommend using t-shirt fabric because it's easier to breathe through. Um, and it's stretchy, so it's going to be more comfortable against your skin and on your face. And you really want something out there. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of people walking around with some really interesting masks, some interesting masks. So, some interesting things that I've discovered or learned about the masks and why they matter. So here's the good news and the bad news. And the bad news is that wearing a mask is only maybe like 60 to 80% effective in keeping viruses um, out of your system. And even then, only if it's making an actual seal, like right here across the bridge of your nose and your face. There can't be any gaps. So if there's any gap between the mask and your face, where like if you imagine a mist, right, like a mist could come down, actually come in contact with you, or you could breathe in, then the mask is not effective. However, the masks have been shown to be over 90, this is the good news, over 90% effective in keeping your viral germs out of other people's faces. And this is extremely important, and this is why they're encouraging everybody to wear masks when they're out in public, because this particular flu virus, you can have it, be contagious, and not have symptoms. So the more you can keep your own viral germs off of other people, the better. And like I said, because nobody knows if they have it or not, there's no symptoms, it's even more important that we become more responsible, have a sense of responsibility and obligation to our community and what's good for them, right? So we literally have to think about other people now that Saturn has moved into Aquarius. Right. So it doesn't, the three layers of fabric is a little confusing, right? So a single layer of fabric is still better than nothing because ultimately, remember, the most important thing is that it's keeping your germs away from other people, right? So masks are 100% effective if we're both wearing them. If only one of us is wearing them, then the only person being protected from catching the virus is the person not wearing the mask. Because if I'm wearing a mask and you're not, but you are uh, infected with the flu, right? Every time you breathe out, this mask only has like a 50 to 60% prevention rate of keeping your viruses out of my respiratory system. If it's the other way around and I, wearing the mask, have the virus, but you don't, this mask that I'm wearing, even though I don't know I have the flu, this mask is going to literally over 90% effective in protecting you from me. So There's that. As far as the 3 pieces of fabric, I mean, obviously, a little extra is better. 1 piece of fabric is fine because what we're really mostly trying to do is keep our germs to ourselves. If you're going to do a filter, like if you are immunocompromised or you have respiratory issues or you're very high risk, right? What you can do is you can use the filters out of a HEPA vacuum bag, right? A HEPA filter. Take the filter out and sandwich that between 2 pieces of fabric as part of your mask. There's all sorts of really good um, instructional videos on YouTube about doing that, but it has to be the HEPA filtration bag from the vacuum cleaners. Like the interfacing and stuff from your sewing box is not going to do anything except, I don't know, make it look nice. No, it's not. In the actual N95 masks, there's and also in the HEPA filter masks, right? There's a it's the virus still goes in through the mask. It's still getting into the mask. What's happening though is the way the fibers are arranged inside, the virus gets tangled in the fibers and there from there is prevented from getting past the mask to you. So it's the same thing with these HEPA filtration filters, right? So viruses that go into those, HEPA filters are like, they're still getting in there. You're not gonna you can't stop them from getting in there, but what happens is it gets tangled in the fibers of the filter, and then it can't get past it, and that's how they work. So the citric acid isn't gonna do you any good. Literally, it's not gonna do you any good. No, don't sprinkle or soak or put anything on these masks that you don't want to breathe in. So if you can't breathe it, right? Then you don't want it on the mask. Like just because the thing about it is has to be there, has to be present, has to be active, or it's not doing anything. And if it is there, active and present, you're breathing it in. So kind of like cocaine, except a lot less fun, right? Like, yeah, it's there and you could breathe it in. That doesn't mean you should be. Yeah, well, the hand washing is important because one of the things that we know about a flu virus is that it has a lipid protein membrane on the outside, and the lipid is the fancy medical word for fat. And what do soaps do? They break down fats. That's why they degrease your pots, your pans, your hands, your hair, right? Right. Well, that's the real challenge these days is that everybody's an expert, or at least they like to think they are. Um, so we're kind of picking and choosing who we're taking advice from. But I can tell you from what I've read and from the little bit that I know from microbiology and my own time in working in hospitals and stuff, that there are some things that we know are just this is just the way it is. So, um, again, the masks are there to keep your germs off of other people. Literally, it's for you to protect other people from you. If we're both wearing masks, it's 100% effective, right? But if only one of us is wearing a mask, the only person being protected is the person not wearing the mask, right? Because the person who is wearing the mask still has a 40 to 50% chance of getting whatever viruses are coming out of the other person, as opposed to the person not wearing a mask who has like less than 10% chance of getting anything from you because all of your viruses are trapped inside your mask where your face is. Ugh. Oh, other things that I learned about the mask. So if you make your own mask, they recommend having at least a couple of them, right? The idea, of course, is that when you come in from outside or having it exposed to other people, you want to take your mask and you want to set it somewhere not in contact with other stuff. Obviously, treat it just like it's contaminated, like radioactive. Um, but also, the key thing here is that it takes 3 days for the viruses to die if they don't have a human host or a living host, right? So the HEPA filters, as an example. So maybe you make a mask with the opening in it to put that HEPA filter inside. When you go to wash your mask, obviously you're not throwing the HEPA filter in there with it, right? So you're going to separate the two, the mask over here and the HEPA filter over here. So the mask goes in the wash. The HEPA filter, they recommend you put out somewhere where it won't be disturbed. Was it 3 days? 3 days you want to let it sit because it'll take 3 days for that virus to finally die off the filter. And then you can reuse the filter. In the meantime, of course, you should have other filters to use on a daily basis um, in lieu of it. But it's 3 days. So if you're using the HEPA filter, take it out when you're ready to wash your mask and let it sit for 3 days before you reuse it. So there you go. Does astrology say anything about people getting sick twice? That's a very good question. Um, Only because I don't do medical astrology. I don't believe in it. I don't support it. I don't advocate it. I don't like it. Um, I'm not a fan. I am not a fan. But this isn't to say that it hasn't been done, and this isn't to say that there isn't some ability to predict these things with it. But I'm not. I won't put my energy into that because I ethically, in terms of ethics, I think it's wrong. And the reason is this: as astrologers and as astrologers and astrology fans, right? We tend to attract vulnerable populations. Just like churches, you typically attract people when they're at their most suggestible or their most vulnerable. This isn't to say that everybody involved in this is suggestible and vulnerable. Everybody who goes to church is not suggestible and vulnerable, but it is to say that the more suggestible or vulnerable someone is, the easier and more appealing stuff like this is, whether it's church or astrology and psychics. So the thing about it is for people who are vulnerable, right, and who are suggestible, being able to forecast, the possible death dates of people or, the prognosis for someone's health is very attractive because it takes away uncertainty. And when you're feeling very vulnerable, like we all are right now, we're all feeling vulnerable at the same time. It's not a great feeling. Um, but everybody knows what you're talking about now, right? So the thing about it is when people are feeling particularly vulnerable, uncertainty is enough to make you crazy. And if we have nothing else, we want more certainty. So, for instance, when you're dealing with somebody who's sick and their illness has a very real impact on your ability to live because you're either dependent on them or maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one that's sick. Um, the desire to know which way these things are going to go is very big, and very urgent. Here's the problem. The problem is, one, to assume or presume that we know anything more or better than doctors, right, and medical professionals is pretty arrogant and very misleading. And the fact of the matter is, astrology is an evolutionary tool. So when we look at a chart, for instance, Saturn has gone into Aquarius at the same time, we're dealing with a global house arrest. Well, Saturn in Aquarius is very much about taking responsibility for your fellow man, your obligations to the community as a whole, your responsibilities for other people's children as well as your own. And what's the thing with masks? It's not there to protect us, it's there to protect other people from us. So wearing a mask becomes an act of civic duty now, right? Especially if you understand what the mask is for. So when we talk about medical prognosis with astrology, as opposed to your doctor or as actual science, we're basically looking to a crystal ball and we're guessing. I don't care what anybody says, you're guessing. And the worst part is this: if somebody's going through a sickness or an illness, if they're having a physical health challenge, there are reasons for this. There are both physical reasons that are measurable and quantifiable. You're having these health issues because your diet is like this, your physical condition is like this, your environmental stressors are like this, yada yada. We can make a list of external reasons why they're having a physical breakdown. Okay. Some of these we can work with and we can fix. Some of them we can't. There some things in life you just have to deal with. You can't fix them or change them. It's nobody's fault. It just is. While this is happening, there are also spiritual things and emotional things and psychological things that are there and present opportunities for growth. Those opportunities for growth and deepening of understanding will show up in an astrology chart because an astrology chart is an evolutionary tool. It's about your individual evolution into the next best version of yourself. All right. This is not the same thing as trying to determine how much better or worse somebody's health is going to get at the beginning of a condition. The other thing, I got a lot to say about this. I'm so sorry. The other thing is that when it comes to health, actual health, and this is separate from the astrology for a second, right? One of the things that we know is that there is a very real mind body connection. So if you believe, really believe that you're going to be okay and you're going to get through this and it's going to heal and resolve itself, you have a much greater chance of surviving whatever you're dealing with than somebody who starts out with their condition completely defeated and in the back of their mind convinced that this is the best it's gonna get. The best it's gonna get. I'm just gonna die. And their condition will deteriorate. And if this doesn't kill them, something else will, or handicap them or cripple them. As astrologers and soothsayers and fans of astrology, right? When you start playing around with charts like this, how much can you guarantee that you're responsible enough to not convey information that is going to be either false hope or, you know, a a condemning verdict, on prognosis of their health condition, which is not actually based on fact or science, but, an astrology chart for God's sakes, right? A crystal ball. You pulled a rune and now you know that they're never going to get any better. Like, really? So for somebody who is vulnerable, i.e., the person who's actually sick, right? Your mystical pronouncements, because you've been right about everything else, has a lot of weight. So you're either going to give them false hope or you're going to give them a false prognosis of condemnation. And you're going to encourage them through mind body connection, to believe that they won't get any better. And then they won't, they'll get worse. So there is literally, in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, there is no good way to look at this because why would you need to know if someone's going to die or if they're going to get, so sickly and frail that they're never going to recover from whatever, unless, I don't know, you've got an insurance policy on them that you're wondering if you should keep paying or cash out on, right? Are you worried about putting them in a nursing home? Is that what it is? Like, what possible motivation could somebody have that are not financially based or convenience based to make you want to know what the timeline is for somebody's sickness? If you're having this experience with them, you are going through a karmic debt repayment with them. And nothing's going to speed up or slow this thing down. And to try and um, bypass it or skirt it or get around it or find a shortcut to alleviate your responsibility in it is only going to make things worse for you. I don't, there are so many things with so many astrologers I don't agree with. I just don't, there are very few of them I even talk to anymore because I can't. I can't. Jesus, I can't. Um, and also to remember that the majority of your astrologers have absolutely zero medical background. Zero, zero. The closest thing some of them get to, and they will brag about this like it means something, right? There's some of these astrologers are really good at beating their chest. Um, like the one I heard was talking about, well, my what is it? My my sister's husband is a plastic surgeon, ergo and therefore I'm perfectly qualified to do medical astrology because I know something. Okay. So this was a very sorry, this is you got me on this. A very long-winded answer to the thing about medical astrology, but so the bottom line is I don't practice it, I don't believe in it, I don't um support it or condone it. I just don't. I just don't. And those are all my reasons why. How did I get into astrology? So, hmm, um, so that's a I like that question too. That's a great question. So here's my story. I started trying to find as much information as I could about astrology back in the day before, in the way back days before the internet. So literally, what you had available to you were pretty much library books if you could find them, or bookstores if you were lucky enough to have one that would occasionally carry something worth reading. Right? Oh my god! And if you lived out in the middle of freaking nowhere, man, you were really screwed. So Um, I was, in my late teens, and I literally trying to get my hands on everything I could find about astrology because I felt that God had failed me and many other people. Nothing made any sense. All the church stuff that I've been brought up with made no sense. How could we have a loving God that would let children suffer? How could we have some type of divine intelligence that would wipe out masses of people without any warning, right? How come bad people kept existing, but good people were dying? Like there were so many things that didn't make any sense if there was, this divine omnipotent being. And more than anything else, I needed explanations, right? So that, and I didn't understand people. I really did not understand people. People made no they still don't make any sense to me, but I have better explanations now than I did before. Um, people I didn't understand people or why they did some of the ridiculous things that they did. Lying, cheating, being mean, being selfish, being conceited. Oh my God. So astrology was also an attempt to try and understand people in a way that was more honest than I was ever going to get from them, right? Um, and it was really good. And it was just a hard, laborious search because, like I said, if you're in the middle of nowhere before the internet, you were libraries and the bookstores. If you were lucky, they might have had an astrology book or two. And then it was later that I ran into some women, some middle-aged women they all knew each other. Because it wasn't like now. There were only a handful of astrologers here and there, and everybody all thought they were the kooky old ladies, right? Um, who practiced astrology. And then when I had someone to actually talk to about it, everything happened faster. So it's much easier to learn when you've got people who bounce ideas back and forth. You guys have no idea how lucky you are to have the internet. Um, and that's when my understanding of astrology and my ability to practice astrology really took off. Of course, at the same time, these two particular women that I'm thinking of that I don't speak to, haven't spoken to in years, and will never speak to again, and would likely piss on their grave if I ever had to go to their funeral, because these two were literally the meanest, most conniving, nasty, bitter women I've ever met in my life. Truly. And these were astrologers. So don't let anybody tell you being an astrologer or a psychic makes you a better person. You can still be a rotten polecat and have psychic abilities or be a really good astrologer. And I'm not going to get into their life stories, but let me tell you, these are not women you would want your daughters to grow up and have as role models because, oh, good Lord. Wow. So it was that was that. And then years and years and years and years later, it was actually Facebook. It was actually when I started getting on Facebook and I started listening to other people talk and all these groups started popping up and I'm having all this conversation with people. That's when I really started to question astrology because I'm like, this can't be right. This is ridiculous. And there have been many times when I was too young to understand what's happening, but now that I'm older looking back, like I get it, right? I have seen people interpret charts through the lens of their bias so shamelessly that it was appalling. Of course, if you're on the receiving end of it because you don't know any better, right? You think that this astrologer, well, they're right about everything else, so clearly this thing must be true because they're irresponsible asses. Is what it is. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. One of these two women that I'm referring to that are just Jesus, not great human beings. One of them had a granddaughter who was adopted. One of her daughters adopted a child who also happened to be Mexican. Now, this particular woman in question was she is mountain hillbilly pedigree, right? Um, which isn't to say anything bad. I mean, this is literally the cultural reference we're using for this person with all of the prejudices and biases that go with it. So this and she was practicing astrology. So this granddaughter of hers, this adopted granddaughter, she went on and on and on and on and on about how this child, because of her chart, um, was going to, lucky if she lived past the age of 18, and, drugs and violence. It's all over the chart, all over the chart, no. And now, mind you, the child is adopted. We don't know anything about the parents who gave her up. And of course, she would, often say that, it's in the chart, that their parents are clearly probably drug addicts and prostitutes. And Jesus, and you wouldn't know that this is her granddaughter, right? Oh, I love my granddaughter. Oh my God. And but then in the same breath saying, yeah, she'll be like, if she lives to 18. So many, many years later, I ran into her. Her granddaughter at this point is in her mid to late 20s, right? Oh, she lived past 18. She lived well past 18. Not only did this child live past 18, thank God this woman's daughter didn't spend a lot of time around her mother. Um, Not only did she live well past 18, she graduated high school, she got a great job, she was in a secure relationship, she was thriving in life, she was doing really well. Um, Absolutely the exact opposite of everything this woman I had listened to predict for her own granddaughter for years, years, but when you look at it and you look at her and her lens of the world, which comes from this Alabama hillbilly kind of mentality, right? All Mexicans are bad, right? Or whatever. I don't even. So when you look at it through her lens of perception and you listen to her prognostications, predictions for her granddaughter based on her chart, right? You realize none of this had anything to do with her chart. It had everything to do with this woman already having a personal bias and using the chart to support that. So it was right about then and listening to these Facebook astrologers, and I was like, I really started to wonder if astrology really has any merit or value. Like, does this actually work? Um, and then eventually I got to the point where I realized, I'm like, it works just fine. The stars are not the problem. It's us. It's not the chart or the astrology. It's the people practicing it. So that's my story. What will be the major effects of the three Jupiter Pluto conjunctions? All right, so we've got Jupiter Pluto conjunction. Oh, in Capricorn. So not the three. So the Jupiter Pluto conjunction in Capricorn is challenging. Um, and remember, and we talked about this in the April horoscope, I'm pretty sure. Jupiter Pluto together will amplify the bejesus out of anything it's involved with. So, in and of themselves, all they're doing is amplifying things. So, they're literally amplifying the signal to almost deafening levels. So, um, there's a thing that they designed a long time ago, right? Like death by sonic wave. So there was the idea that you could blast a sound or a sound signal so loud at such a high decibel or at a specific frequency that you could either kill all living things and have the buildings remain intact, or you would literally like kill people, from the and destroy buildings with this sound. So this amplification of sound um, has some tremendously lethal possibilities. Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn, or Jupiter and Pluto by themselves together, is like that amplification of sound. It has such overwhelming magnitude of force that it is potentially lethal. It is also potentially miraculous. So we're like literally on a razor's edge. It could go one way or it could go the other. Um, and a lot of it has to do with the planetary involvement and our consciousness. Because Jupiter, remember, Jupiter is the higher consciousness. Jupiter is the ninth house in the chart. It's the sign that rules Sagittarius. The ninth house in Sagittarius have to do with higher functioning thought. It has to do with the future. It has to do with higher education. It has to do with teaching. It has to do with justice. And all these are abstract out there concepts. These are things that exist beyond our individual self, right? Sagittarius in the ninth house, it's the same thing. It has to do with big meta, META concepts, things that are out there and larger than our small lives. So that with Pluto, and that's the higher consciousness, right? And with Pluto, which represents the depths of consciousness, the very depths to which we can go to, okay? Those two things together have everything to do with amplifying and magnifying our thoughts. So, where we allow our thoughts to be held has everything to do with how this Jupiter Pluto is going to manifest itself, right? Depending on what other planets are in contact with it. So, as an example, if we had a Jupiter Pluto conjunction in Capricorn with Venus in this configuration, either by 45-degree or 90-degree aspects, or by the major Ptolemaic aspects, right? But so the planetary picture we're seeing is Jupiter, Pluto, Venus. On the one hand, we could have tremendous masses of wealth that are suddenly discovered or accumulated, right? We may discover some precious metal that's never been known to man before that has un- unbelievable, almost limitless properties and magnitude in terms of what it's potentially capable of doing. Or it could be the other end of that, right? That Jupiter, Pluto, Venus could also, on the other side of that, represent an absolute sinking to the depths of depravity and corruption, right? And just spiritual ugliness, depravity, right? Jupiter, Pluto, Venus, it could absolutely be the depths of depravity, right? Something literally right out of the 90 days of Solomon or Solomon or something. Anyway, it was a foreign film by an Italian filmmaker that was it was right up there with Caligula. It was a bad, ugly, scary, depraved movie. Anyway, so Jupiter and Pluto is going to amplify the signal. Now, what direction it amplifies it in has everything to do with where we have our consciousness, right? Because here in the USA, as an example, this man that we have in the office of president right now, because he's it's not because he's in possession of some spectacular or magical trait. He's this whole cult. He's not this whole thing about cult of personality, and he's so Mr. Showman and yada yada yada. He's not. We're going to look back on this in history, and we're going to wonder what kind of spell we were under, right? Like who's got the voodoo doll of the United States they're putting pins in? Because he does not have a warm, engaging, inspiring personality. He's not attractive at any level, physically or otherwise. He's not charismatic. He's not a powerful orator. He's not even that smart, right? There's nothing about this man that makes him any better than slightly above average, maybe in a couple of areas. And even then, only because and by benefit of the fact that he has money and connections, right? And yet, he's not only the president of the United States, but he has a cadre of people who are so loyal to him that even now with everything the entire planet knows about what he's doing and has been doing and the position he's put us all in with this pandemic and continues to encourage, right? This Jim Jones kind of mentality. There are still people defending him, still following him, still defending him, right? So why is this happening for somebody who is such a talentless goober, right? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that in every country, but especially the United States, where you have a figurehead, right? In our case, our president is our figurehead. They are a symbol of our mass consciousness, right? The national consciousness. So this person represents our mentality, right? Or at least certainly the mentality of people in the majority of people in positions of getting this person voted in. So he represents a mass consciousness for the people who are adamantly, loyally defending him even now as he's asking them literally to drink the Jim Jones hydroquinolone, Kool-Aid. Oh my God. So with Jupiter and Pluto, because we've got a couple more conjunctions to go, or maybe at least one more to go. I have to check. With that said, where the rest of us put our minds and our consciousness, where the rest of us accept as possible or probable realities, has everything to do with what we're going to see coming. The thing that people don't seem to understand is that a lot of what we're seeing with, the pandemic and with all of these, quote unquote natural disasters and yada yada yada. I mean, the only thing we're missing are the plague of locusts, right? Um, you've got a group of people who have been calling for Armageddon and the end of the world for freaking ever. As metaphysicians, all of you say that you believe in mind over matter, we can manifest our own reality and we create the future. We say this, but do we really mean it? Do we believe it? Those Christians believe it. Not the sane ones, the crazy ones. The crazy ones were out here, thumping Bibles and, trying to beat everybody back into the dark ages because they're convinced that the sooner we all die, the sooner they get to get on the special bus and go to heaven without us. Those Christians, you know, and I can only say Christians because this is where I live. If I lived in Saudi Arabia, maybe I'd be talking about the Muslims, right? But I'm not in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. I'm here in the United States. And here it's the Christians, the Bible thumping crazy Christians that are screaming for the end of the world, that have been doing it for years, that are committed to their vision of the end of the world coming, right? That have done it with conviction and force and continuity. And now we're starting to see it. And we're not seeing it because a small group of people believe it. We're starting to see it because a small group of people have committed themselves to believing this and have never let that belief go. And the rest of us have kind of followed along because we haven't been strong or committed enough in our own thoughts about what we want the future to look like or what it should look like or what it can look like. Okay, so we aren't working hard enough on believing that we can live in a peaceful, cultural, artistic, thriving society where babies are fat and happy and children and teenagers have the ability to be children and teenagers without harassment or threat by adults. And we have old people who can live and age peacefully and gracefully and safely. As metaphysicians, if we have not committed ourselves to maintaining that vision of the future with as much belief and confidence as we know the sun is coming up in the morning, with as much belief and confidence as these crazy wackadoodle religious people are convinced that the end of the world is coming, then we can't really complain about what we're dealing with. And Jupiter and Pluto right now is going to amplify the signal for everybody's thoughts. So if we're all buying into their reality, that's the reality we're all going to end up with. All right. So I don't know if I'm broadcasting or not. I'm getting a thing that says unable to connect to chat. So if you guys have been talking, I have not been seeing it. Yeah. See, I think because I'm not getting any chat now at all. I think because everybody is home, everybody's on YouTube. Now live stream is misbehaving. I don't know what happened. Okay, so I am unable to get chat messages here. So what I'm going to do, by the way, folks, I have a podcast. I want to write this down so you can see it because technology is everybody's friend but mine. So on the podcast, if you go to my podcast page, you can actually leave me a voice message. And in your voicemail, it will cut you off after a certain point. I don't know how much recording it actually does, but you can leave a voicemail for me, and if I can use it in a show, I will certainly use it in a show, and everybody will hear your lovely lilting voice broadcast all over the internet as you ask a question, and I give you an answer. So, so you see this. So I don't know if you can say it or not. So my podcast is Anchor.fm Primal Girl Wellness. That's my podcast page. This live stream will be on the podcast as well, so to figure out how to record it. And because I cannot get chat up now, I don't know what's going on. The tech gods are not loving me tonight. Yeah. They can't get chat up. I can't we This is literally a one-sided conversation. Um, and that's gonna get pretty pretty dull pretty quickly. So all right, so this is it. We will try again shortly. Hang in there. Keep your thoughts in the right place. Remember, Jupiter and Pluto is going to magnify everything, everything. So if you really see yourself as a metaphysician and you really believe in mind over matter and creating reality and all that sort of stuff, now is the time to do it. Now it's time to do it and to stay with it. Because if you don't, then what we are left with are people who are creating our realities for us. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.